The time has come. Well, technically, in 3 days, the time will come. The NASCAR Xfinity Series playoffs begin this weekend at Kansas Speedway on Saturday. But as I have promised you all, those of you in Australia and New Zealand, who I very much appreciate, by the way, I'm finally going to do it. Today is the day I'm going to explain to you the NASCAR playoff system, how it works, how you advance in the playoffs, how you win the championship, and then I will give you some numbers. I will give you Shane Van Gisbergen's numbers so far on each and every different type and style of racetrack. I'm going to tell you about each and every racetrack we go to for these NASCAR Xfinity Series playoffs. And then, of course, I will tell you Shane Van Gisbergen's chances at the championship and anything else I need to tell you. I got a bunch of notes here, like just all these notes in this notebook with all these numbers, all this stuff to tell you about Shane Van Gisbergen and his first ever NASCAR playoffs appearances. This year, it's in the Xfinity Series. Now, first, let's look at Shane Van Gisbergen's season so far. His 2024 season has been his rookie season in the Xfinity Series, which is just the step below to the Cup Series. Of course, SVG in the Cup Series next year. He has 3 wins this season, all on road courses. That first one came at Portland in June. Then the next week, he won at Sonoma, another road course. And then later in July, he won at the Chicago Street Race. He has 2 stage wins this year. One came at Sonoma, one came at Chicago. We'll talk about how those impact the playoffs here in a minute. He has 6 top 5s, 8 top 10s, and his best oval finish this year was at Atlanta, which was a 3rd place finish. His best non-super speedway finish was a 6th place finish at Phoenix in the spring. For those of you who are curious on the odds, SVG on Caesars Sportsbook is currently sitting at 40-1 odds to win the Xfinity Series championship. That is the second to last in the odds out of the 12 playoff drivers, only ahead of Sammy Smith. Now let's do it. Let's talk about the NASCAR playoff system. Firstly, some of you are going to be wondering, why are there NASCAR playoffs? Great question. Don't really have an answer for that one. But now I will explain this system to you. Get yourself a look at the bracket. A lot to process here because this is racing. This is auto racing. This is not a basketball tournament, a rugby tournament, a soccer tournament, or any other tournament you could think of. How does one in auto racing advance to the next round without it being a head-to-head matchup? It's a valid question. It's a great question. Here is how. 12 drivers qualify for the NASCAR Xfinity playoffs. How do you qualify for those playoffs? Well, you win a regular season race or you finish the highest you can in points. This season, we had 8 full-time drivers win a race, and that locked in their spot in the Xfinity Series playoffs. So now that we had 8 of the 12 spots filled out, that means 4 spots remain. Those 4 remaining spots go to the highest finishing positions in points. So whether it's 7th through 10th in the point standings, or if it were, let's say, hypothetically, if it was 16th through 20th, then there you go. But that would be mathematically impossible in this situation. But anyways, the way you qualify for the playoffs, win a race, or you can lock yourself in by finishing the highest position in points. So that's how we got our 12 playoff drivers. Who are these 12 playoff drivers? They are Justin Allgaier, Cole Custer, Austin Hill, Chandler Smith, Shane Van Gisbergen, Jesse Love, Sam Mayer, Riley Herbst. Those are your 8 winners this year. Sheldon Creed, AJ Allmendinger, Sammy Smith, and Parker Kligerman. So 11 of those 12 guys, obviously Shane Van Gisbergen's competition. So now that you know how these guys got into the playoffs, now that you know how they got seeded in a sense, here's how we give bonus points, or playoff points as they are officially called. If you are to win a race in the regular season or at any point of the season, which we will break down here in a second, you get 5 playoff points for that race win. You get all the extra bonuses with the money and the trophy. You get to do a burnout, go in victory lane and celebrate. But on top of that, and the playoff berth, you get 5 bonus points that go with you wherever you go in the NASCAR playoffs. And if you win a stage, which as I mentioned earlier, Shane Van Gisbergen won 2 stages earlier this year. If you win a stage, you get 1 playoff point. You get a bonus point for that. If you are to finish in the top 10 of the regular season standings, you get some bonus points for that as well. The regular season champion was not Justin Allgaier. He choked it. If the regular season championship, Cole Custer, he won that thing, so he gets 15 playoff points. Justin Allgaier finished second in the regular season championship. He got 10 bonus points. Third place got 8. Fourth place got 7. Fifth place got 6. And on through 10th, who got 1 playoff point extra. Shane Van Gisbergen did not finish in the top 10 of the regular season standings, so therefore no extra points for that. But he currently sits at 17 playoff points. 3 wins equals 15. 2 stage wins equals 2. Slap that together, 17 playoff points. So that ultimately determines the beginning of each round. And so if Shane Van Gisbergen is to advance, he will start the next round at 17 points versus resetting to 0. If you have any questions about this, ask me in the comments. It's a very complicated system. Even Shane Van Gisbergen said it himself.
Yeah, the playoff system is crazy. I studied it last night trying to understand how it works. It's the most overcomplicated racing series I've been a part of, but I think it's pretty cool. It's great for the fans.
But now that we got the points down, now that we know who's in it, I've talked a lot already, but let's talk about how you advance. Well, how you advance is by these mini seasons. We'll call them mini seasons. In the Xfinity Series, there are 2 mini seasons. This first one comes at Kansas, Talladega, and the Charlotte Roval. The objective is to advance. Well, how do you advance? The easiest way is to win. If you win any of the 3 races, you advance automatically, no questions asked. If you finish last at Kansas, last at Talladega, but you go out and win at the Charlotte Roval, it doesn't matter if you scored the least amount of points in the round. You won a race, you advance. Obviously, the most winners there can be in this round is 3, and that leaves 5 positions to be desired in that next round. Well, it's the same thing as the regular season. The next 5 up on points, or I should say, if there are point availabilities, 5 being the absolute minimum, then it's whoever finishes highest in the points. And after this first round, we will see 4 drivers eliminated. Those will be the bottom 4 drivers in the points after 3 races. They will be eliminated from playoff contention. They will still be able to show up each and every week and compete for wins, try to go finish 5th in the point standings, but at the end of the day, they cannot compete for the championship if you are eliminated. It's the same story in the round of 8 when we go to Las Vegas, Homestead Miami Speedway, and Martinsville Speedway. It will be the same situation. If you win at any 3 of those racetracks, then you advance to the championship 4. If you finish in the bottom 4 of the points, you will be eliminated. So essentially, in this first round, to simplify it into just a couple of sentences, you either have to win a race or finish top 5 in the or top 8 in the points, or you are eliminated. But then, after that round, if you are to advance, a new mini season begins. You reset the points. If you have playoff points, you get to start with those playoff points once again. Shane Van Gisbergen, if he advances, gets to start out with 17 points once again. And let's do it again. Let's do another mini season. The bottom 4 in the points are eliminated. If you win a race, you advance to the championship 4. And then after that, it's just 1 point spot for that. So now what about the championship 4? How does that work? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. If you make the championship 4, you just got to beat the other 3 guys. It doesn't matter how you do it. If you guys finish 1, 2, 3, 4, whoever finishes first, you win. The playoff points do not carry over to the championship 4 race. So if Shane Van Gisbergen were to advance to the championship 4, no bonus points. Even Justin Allgaier, who has the most, no bonus points. It is a straight up who finishes the highest wins the championship. Even if they finish 35th, 36th, 37th, 38th, all crash on lap 1, whoever limps the farthest around the track, they win the championship. Once again, if you have any questions about this format in the comments, please do ask me. It's a complicated process. I understand if there's a lot of questions. It took me a while to learn it. It took me to maybe year 2 of the playoffs to fully understand what was going on. It's a very complicated system, and it really doesn't need to be. Well, now that we have finally explained this playoff format, you know that 4 drivers get eliminated each and every round. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about each and every round. Round number 1, the round of 12. 12 drivers fighting for 8 spots in that next round, and those 3 tracks are going to be Kansas, Talladega, and the Charlotte Roval. Let's look at this first race first. Kansas. It's a 1.5 miles, which is equivalent to 2.4 kilometers. It's a tri-oval. It is an intermediate racetrack. Shane Van Gisbergen on the intermediates this year has a 19.5 average finish, though that does include a DNF at Las Vegas when he blew an engine on lap 30. He has had 8 races on the intermediate tracks in his Xfinity Series career with a best finish of 7th, and that came at Darlington just a few weeks ago. Now, looking at this first round and looking at the playoffs, there are 2 new tracks for Shane Van Gisbergen, and one of them is Kansas.
There's 3 tracks that are an unknown for me, really, with it's Kansas, Homestead, which I haven't been to, and then Vegas, which we did at the start of the year, but I didn't get many laps at all. Missed most of practice and then had the motor blow up in the race. So, yeah, those tracks are probably my focus to learn and get better at. And the other ones I kind of understand, know what to expect, know what I want from the car. So yeah, we should be fine.
The second track in this round is Talladega Superspeedway. This is a track that Shane Van Gisbergen has raced at back in the spring in both Xfinity and Cup. He finished 22nd back in the spring, and if you look at his numbers on the Superspeedways this year, he has a 17.8 average finish, 5 races at the Superspeedways with a best finish of 3rd back in the spring at Atlanta. And then this third race, the Charlotte Roval. It's a road course, but it's inside and uses an oval. Now, the Charlotte Roval has been reconfigured, actually. I'll show you a map of the original track. As you can see, Shane Van Gisbergen did race at the Charlotte Oval back in the spring, and that is a typical oval racetrack. But this track is different. I talked about Pocono over the summer and said that was the most unique oval we went to. Well, there's a reason I didn't say the most unique racetrack in NASCAR. That belongs to this track. The Charlotte Roval uses aspects from the infield, which is a true road course part of the track, but also uses aspects of the oval. Now, it races like a road course all the way through, but, having to get up on that banking in slow speeds, having to shift as you go up through the gears around the racetrack, get to the backstretch chicane, and then coming down the front stretch and not using the quad oval and using a chicane there, it makes it a nice and unique experience. But as I said, there is a massive change. You've gotten a good look at the old map. Well, here is the new map. As you can see at turn 5, rather than going more into the infield, you kind of just got a couple more straightaways, and you eventually go to a hairpin back onto the oval versus kind of a faster flowing turn onto the oval. Now, because of this, that means because it's a new configuration, a new racetrack, there's going to be a long practice. Usually in NASCAR, how it works in the modern era, or the modern day, not the modern era, really the last 3 years, is you only get about 20 minutes of practice. And with a new racetrack, a new configuration, or a new tire, a new aerodynamic package, you get an extended practice, a 50-minute or a 45-minute practice, so the teams can learn about the track, learn how their cars are running, learn how the tire is going to wear. Well, at Charlotte, the teams will get that. So now that you have the detail on the first round of these tracks, I'm going to give you my thoughts on how Shane Van Gisbergen could potentially advance. And I'm going to be brutally honest when I talk about Shane Van Gisbergen's playoff chances, and I'm going to start right now. Getting out of this round is extremely possible. In fact, I would say it's favorable. And we all know why. It's that road course. It's the Charlotte Roval. And if we look at history, the Charlotte Roval supports Colleague. A.J. Allmendinger has won at this track at least 3 times in the Xfinity Series, and he's the defending winner in the Cup Series at this race. So AJ Allmendinger knows how to get around this track, will be a heavy threat for the win. But for Shane Van Gisbergen, do I really have to tell you more? I mean, I got his numbers written down on the road courses. A 7th place average finish, 5 races, 3 wins, and 4 top 5s. And that 5th race is really dragging that average finish down because he got penalized for cutting the course. And he ended up 27th instead of finishing 3rd, I think it was, on the road. So Shane Van Gisbergen at the road courses, at worst, is a top 5 contender. So unless he gets wrecked, unless they have a mechanical failure, at worst, he's finishing 5th. And that's pessimistic. So Shane Van Gisbergen is going to get, if he doesn't win, he's going to get a huge haul of points in this race. And that could make up for his weakest race in this round, which is Kansas. Shane Van Gisbergen's talked about it. We all know it. We've all watched it. I've talked about it this entire season. And Shane Van Gisbergen said his approach isn't really changing with these new racetracks. You look at Kansas and Miami as the brand new ones, and Vegas is one that, as you heard earlier in that clip, that's basically a new one because he only got 30-ish laps at it. But it's probably going to be the same story. Qualified 25th to 30th. That first stage, I'm not going to say is a waste, but he's not going to get stage points. He's not going to get any bonuses out of it. Stage 2, take a step forward, finish in the top 20, and then that 3rd stage, make a charge, finally get the car under you and have a competitiveness to you, and he'll probably get a top 15, maybe 16th or 17th, depending on how the day goes, but, a top 15, I think that's realistic, but I don't know if he can get as competitive of a finish as he had at Darlington the second time around because it's a new racetrack, because he hasn't driven here before. That's going to be his mulligan, let's call it. But the problem with Kansas, a normal racetrack being your mulligan, is that the next race is Talladega. And I'm going to be brutally honest again. Shane Van Gisbergen does have a possibility of winning this race, but so does 80% of the field in this race. Talladega is a crapshoot. Talladega is random. Talladega is wild. You are going to see wrecks there. You're going to see a 10-car pileup in this race. It's how this style of racing goes. Daytona and Talladega are known for their big fiery wrecks and their random, wacky underdog winners. We've seen it plenty of times. We saw it just a few weeks ago in the Cup Series. Harrison Burton, who ran dead last in the points all year long, won the race. Anything can happen at this racetrack, which for Shane Van Gisbergen could be a good thing. You look at some of the ovals he's been on. He's kind of struggled. Or there's been others he's excelled at, but, he's in the back half of the top 10. But I look back at that Talladega spring race. Shane Van Gisbergen led a couple laps, ran in the top 10 for the majority of the race, but ultimately at the end, ironically, it wasn't a wreck that caught him out. It was fuel mileage that caught him out and ended up giving him that 22nd place finish. So Talladega, you're going to go into it optimistic. He's going to have a great shot at a competitive finish, but you can't predict this thing. You don't know what he's going to do. He could run top 5 all day long. He could lead a bunch of laps. And if he scores stage points, that'll make up for if the inevitable happens. If he gets involved in a wreck. If he gets involved in a late race restart. If he gets involved in a late race fuel mileage situation like the spring. At the end of the day, I could give you all these notes, give you all these statistics, but at the end of the day, Talladega is unpredictable. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. But optimistically, I think a top 5 to top 10 is extremely possible. This is going to be a great shot at a competitive finish. And if Kansas goes bad, if he doesn't run top 20, if he gets involved in a wreck, if a motor blows like it did at Vegas, they're going to have to be aggressive at Talladega. They're going to have to try to make up on points. Yes, you can look at the Roval. Yes, you can say, okay, let's go win that thing because we know we're capable of it. And Shane Van Gisbergen could go and lead every lap and win. Yes, that's technically possible. But you guys who have watched the races this year, I have witnessed it in front of me at COTA. If this thing comes down to a late race restart, it gets freaky. And in the playoffs, it doesn't just get freaky for the win. If someone is 1 point behind the cutoff line and they're running 13th and they need to finish 12th to advance, they'll move you. They'll wreck you. They will do what they have to do to get that one single point. Every position is a point. And if you need to finish 13th, whoever's in 13th, sucks to be you. I will move you. It's going to happen. And so you're going to see all these late race cautions, all these late race chaos, restarts. So once again, I think it's extremely realistic and more than likely going to happen that Shane Van Gisbergen's going to win at the Roval and get him out of this round. But you don't want to too heavily lean on that because of the chaos of Talladega, because Kansas is a new racetrack. But if things go somewhat normal, if I had to predict it, I would say a 15th to 20th place finish at Kansas. A top 10 at Talladega is possible, but even if he wrecks, I think winning the Charlotte Roval is extremely realistic, extremely possible, and that will get him to the round of 8. Now we move on to the round of 8. Unlike that first round, there is no road course to use as a crutch, in a sense, to gain a lot of points or to win, to advance yourself. This is where I'm going to be brutally honest after I just kind of talk about these tracks here. Las Vegas and Homestead, both 1.5 mile tracks, about 2.4 kilometers. Kind of Vegas and Kansas are very similar. And I do think if Shane advances, that is going to be a big benefit to him, is that he just ran Kansas 3 weeks ago. Kansas and Vegas are the same length track. They're about the same shape in terms of the tri-oval. They have similar banking. They're both similar in that you can run the very bottom of the track, you can run the middle, or you can run up on the wall. But once again, Shane Van Gisbergen did not get a lot of laps at this race in the spring, and it could come back to bite him. Now, he does have some laps at this track, but it was his first ever intermediate track. No idea what to expect, and you're hoping to learn. You're hoping to get everything you can done that day, even if you finish 28th based on raw speed, but he didn't even get 28 laps, I don't think. Could come back to bite him. And then it doesn't help that the next week, Homestead Miami Speedway, while it's another multi-grooved 1.5 mile track, it's a different shape, and it's a completely different track. It's a track that Shane Van Gisbergen's not been to. And you can kind of see where I'm going with this, but this is the round I'm pessimistic about. Shane Van Gisbergen's a great driver. He's adapted to some of these tracks really well. If he was going to all these tracks for a second time, I'd say he could top 10 his way into the Final Four if some things happen. But with the limited laps at Vegas, with not racing at Miami, I think at the end of the day, that is going to hurt him points-wise. But, big old but here, Martinsville went well in the spring. Martinsville, Shane Van Gisbergen ran top 15 most of the day, if I remember correctly. Martinsville, Shane Van Gisbergen finished 11th. And if Shane Van Gisbergen takes as big of a step forward at Martinsville as he did at Darlington a few weeks ago, and it's his second trip there, well, we could see a much more competitive result. But the problem is, here is the biggest problem. He has those 17 bonus points. Those could come into play. Those could end up saving him. The problem is Justin Allgaier. He has 34 points. Cole Custer has 28. Austin Hill has 25. Chandler Smith has 24. And more than likely, those guys will win these races and they'll get more points. But Shane Van Gisbergen could win the Roval and he could get more points. So there's a lot to break down. There's a lot to think through here. There's a lot you could look at here. But if I'm being realistic here, if I'm being brutally honest, I think it could come down to a must-win scenario. Now, how does Shane Van Gisbergen get out of this round? I'm going to give you that first. As I said, winning is the easiest way, but these 3 ovals are extremely hard to win at. So realistically, and this is another big thing with Shane Van Gisbergen, it's not really a fault of his own. It's the fact of the matter that he has not been to a lot of these racetracks the first time. He's still learning how to qualify the car. And on these ovals, usually you can pass a lot, so qualifying doesn't usually matter. But when you need stage points in stage 1 and the stages are only 40 laps, that's when it becomes a problem. But let's say Shane Van Gisbergen, let's say Kansas is a huge help to his Vegas case, and he shows up to Vegas and runs top 10. Let's say he finishes 7th like he did at Darlington. Even if he doesn't get stage points, that's a good haul of points. And we're going to anticipate playoff drivers having some sort of issue, whether it's a crash, tire blows out, engine issues. That's a good haul of points. And with your 17, potentially 22 bonus points, you're going into Homestead sitting pretty. Homestead, though, this is the track I'm going to put lowest in this round. I think it's going to be a normal SVG day, a top 15 to top 20, but let's take the front end of it. Let's say he gets a 15th, and once again, a couple playoff drivers have problems. So we've got a 7th place at Vegas. We've got a 15th at Miami. At this point, it's going to take a top 5 at worst at Martinsville, but I can't completely rule it out, honestly, because Martinsville's a driver's racetrack. It's heavy braking like a road course. It's a one-groove track, which Shane Van Gisbergen compared Indianapolis to a road course because it's a single-groove track. Well, if he can get in a groove, get in a rhythm, figure that track out, and he gets top 3, pointing his way in with a 7th, a 15th, and a 3rd with all the bonus points he has is not that crazy of a thought. But this is going to be the best of the best. But one other advantage SVG has is that there's no one clear-cut favorite. There's not going to be the same 3 guys running in the top 3 every week. Some weeks it's Justin Allgaier. Some weeks it's Cole Custer. Every once in a while it's Chandler Smith. Maybe we'll see Sheldon Creed up there. So it's so difficult to predict. But for Shane Van Gisbergen, I think the way he gets into the Final Four, the Championship 4, it's going to have to be a top 10 at Vegas, a top 15 at Homestead, and a top 3 at Martinsville. And I think with his bonus points, I think that would be enough to get him to the Championship 4. But it still may not. That 15th may hold him back. But if he can do that, he can rely on the troubles of others maybe. Maybe he could get to that Championship 4. And as I said, the Championship 4, it's not as much of a crapshoot as Talladega, but it might as well be. You just got to beat the other 3 guys. And Shane Van Gisbergen finished 6th in this race in the spring. Ran top 15 the entire race, used a late race restart. And at the end of the day, your guess is as good as mine. But it's going to be difficult to beat Justin Allgaier, Cole Custer, Chandler Smith, Austin Hill, whoever's going to be in there. They're going to have a heavy advantage over Shane Van Gisbergen when it comes down to winning that championship. Tomorrow I will make my full Xfinity Series predictions. I will go through the bracket. I will much more simplify the explanation of the playoff format. But I will tell you who I think is going to advance, who I think is going to make the Final Four, who I think is going to win the championship, and I will more than likely be wrong. But in conclusion, I'm at 31 minutes of recording now. I have no idea how long this is going to be. Shane Van Gisbergen's path to the 2024 championship condensed into just a couple of sentences. Getting out of the first round is extremely realistic. A win at the Roval, that gets you through. Even if you don't win, a top 5 or top 10 at Talladega, it's possible. Do that, get a top 5 at the Roval, you're through. Second round will be more complicated. You got a track you've never been to. You got another track that you've really never been to. You've only got 30 laps on it. But Martinsville, that's a place to look at. That is a driver's racetrack. And look how Shane Van Gisbergen did at a driver's racetrack in his second race there at Darlington. Something special could happen. And if you get to Phoenix, who knows what's going to happen? Anyways, it's been a fun year for Shane Van Gisbergen, learning some of these ovals, learning some of these racetracks, but it's time to fight for a championship for him. How will he do? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Once again, if you need further explanations on the playoff format, I am here for you. I will do my best to answer questions. It's a complicated format. I will do my best. But thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys tomorrow for my Xfinity Series official predictions, I guess if you want to call them that.